So here's a right lane change, and you can see I've slowed it down, so this is running half speed. It moves over, it gets stuck on the dotted line, and then makes another move. So it makes two corrections here, as you can see in the upper right cluster panel. This is the androsensor data. You can see on the top is the gyroscope measuring the velocity of the steering wheel, and then the accelerometer measuring in the x direction, left to right, about how the acceleration in the car is in meters per second squared. So this data also on the gyroscope, if the curve is going up, that means it's moving to the left. If the curve is going down, it's moving to the right. So this is a case of a right-hand lane change. You can see right before 395 seconds, it's starting to move to the right. You can see that in the acceleration, so you get an acceleration feeling. And then there's a big blip up at 395, almost at 0.4 radians per second. That's 23 degrees per second, so this is a pretty good change on the steering wheel going up, which is actually in the opposite direction. So in this case, you can see in the accelerometer data, you get a 5 meter per second squared acceleration, and that's a pretty big yank. That's almost a half a G. So you're feeling that in your seat, so that's pretty uncomfortable. And then you see a couple of more modifications or moves between 395 and 400. These are spikes down on the gyroscope where you can see that the car is moving to the right. You see that in the accelerometer data. You get a few peaks there, probably not as big. The car is probably getting stuck in the middle of the lane, starting around 400 seconds in the dotted lane. And then out at 407, you can see a big spike. That's a pretty wide pulse. You don't see that in the accelerometer data, but that's going in the up direction, so that's going back to the left, so it's probably settling in the lane at that point. So this is a case where it's taking quite a bit of time. It's taken almost 15 seconds to make this move. It's making really rapid changes to the steering wheel, so you're feeling that both in the acceleration as well as taking a long time to move over because it's such a long move. So I'd call this a failure. I'm sure Tesla is aware of this, which drove some of the changes in the later releases. And out at about 412 seconds, you can ignore those big spikes because I was using that just to mark the data. This is a case of another auto lane change going to the left, and you can see the cluster with the left directional on. This again playing at half speed. Makes the move. It makes it really rapidly this time. Hard to tell maybe in the half-speed video, but it didn't have the same jerk, but really rapid. Here's the andro data, and you can see it's hard to say when the left turn actually started because the first blip you see is at around 460 seconds, and it's only going down to 0.2 radians per second, so that's not that big a move, and that's actually to the right, not to the left. And then you see some bigger spikes happening at 465 to 467 seconds, adjusting it back to the lane. Those are fairly rapid changes of the wheel. You're not seeing that in the acceleration because the pulse widths are large enough. So this happened rapidly, but it didn't jerk the car around and was probably less objectionable to the driver. This is a case where we're making a right auto lane change. Again, this is in half speed, slow motion. So it starts to initiate the turn. It starts going through the dotted line. My notes here were it was pretty graceful when it first started. Didn't really feel like much acceleration. So this one I would have given it a pass, even though we're on dot 76. Here's the andro data, and you can see on the gyroscope the move started at around 547 seconds. You see 1, 2, 3 basic moves, all relatively small at less than 0.2 radians per second, and then you don't see much action on the accelerometer, and then there's a big move at 557 at 0.4 radians per second, but the pulse width is large enough so you don't get a big impact on the accelerometer. So overall, this seems to be a relatively comfortable move. It's happening more over 10 seconds than over 5 seconds, so you don't get that rapid feel, making small moves, so this one would be relatively comfortable. This is a case where we're going to show two moves back to back. First, a right lane change, again at half speed on the video. Makes that move over. This one didn't feel that bad to me at the time. And then I'm going to follow it up directly with a left-hand lane change. You can see the cars in the front are quite a bit different. Like last time, it kind of gets paused on the dotted line, moves over, makes multiple moves, and this one wasn't so good from a field viewpoint. Here's the androsensor data. You can see on the gyroscope on top, it makes the first move at roughly 1,047 seconds. a little over 0.2 radians per second, then makes its next move. Again, this is moving to the right at about 1,051, 52 seconds, and those amplitudes aren't that large. You can see the acceleration isn't being impacted. So that first move, even though it makes two pretty large changes of the velocity of the steering wheel, didn't feel that bad. Ignore the excursions on the 1,055. That's just me marking the data. But then it gets interesting starting at 1,057, where you can see it's kind of all over the place. At first, the steering wheel seems to be going up, which is to the left, which is a left lane change, but then it moves to the right, settles, moves to the right again, moves to the left, and then goes way up, moving to the left over 0.4 radians per second, then goes down again to the opposite direction. So this thing is ping-ponging around. Honestly, I'm not sure I know what the reason is. I see the accelerometer. It's not like the acceleration is jerking you around, but the steering wheel is going back and forth, and it's ping-ponging, and you kind of don't know, is this ever going to make the lane change or not? And you can see that this lane change is probably taking over 15 seconds to make. So this is another failure, like an early one that I showed, and I'm sure Tesla knows what the root cause is. This video is playing back at 2x speed, nothing exciting, just going around a bend at pretty high speed to see if we see silky smoothness or not. As you can see in the andro sensor data, looks pretty clean, nothing dramatic going on in either velocity or acceleration. So it looks pretty smooth and felt pretty smooth to me. Here's the last lane change, so I thought we'd look at what a human would do, me. So here I am without auto steer on, making a left lane change, and then making a right lane change. And I thought we'd compare this now to all the various other andro data that we've seen with auto steer. So here it is. Again, ignore the big excursions on the left and the right. You can see that I make a left turn. You can see the gyroscope data going up a little bit, then goes down a little bit for making the right turn. You can see the accelerometer really quiet. Nothing on the gyroscope or the velocity of the steering wheel more than 0.2 radians per second. So all quiet. This is how I think a normal human would be, and I think this is quite a bit different than what we've been seeing with the robotic auto steer going on, which we've been experiencing dramatic changes in radians per second of the steering wheel, and also acceleration happening within the vehicle. Now switching gears a little bit, let's look at some other autopilot defects that weren't measured by the accelerometer and the gyroscope. This portion of the video is going 3/4 speed. You can see in the instrument cluster the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. We're just going by a 55 mile per hour speed limit, as many as you mentioned. The database coming from the GPS is not accurate. This is an example of the speed limits working correctly. The speed limit is 40 miles an hour, TACC set to 45. I pass a sign that now the speed limit drops to 30. The car recognizes it. It automatically drops the speed. And this is a good thing that getting through this town, I didn't get a ticket. So thank you, Tesla. The video here is going at half speed through a town. You see going at a very slow speed, going through an intersection where we lose the lane markers. It has the left one only, goes through the intersection, loses the right one, picks up the double yellow line on the left, misses the one on the right. Now thinks the one on the right double yellow line is the middle of the lane. I'm stuck in the middle of the road now. Obviously a big failure. This is a result of having today only using the lane markers for direction for auto steer. This video is going at full speed, going here 40 miles an hour roughly in a 45 mile an hour zone. There's a car up in my lane. I don't think TACC, the radar sees that car. It continues to barrel at 45 miles an hour and never sees it. And I had to turn auto steer off because I thought I'd plow right into him. I don't understand when it sees it and when it doesn't. Very inconsistent. This video is going at 3/4 speed. Watch the car in the left lane. Auto steer thinks it has both lane markers coming up. They're about to disappear. The car on the left isn't seen by auto steer. The lane disappears. The car moves over to the left. The other car is moving over to the right. If I hadn't turned off auto steer, we would have collided. This clip is going at 3/4 speed in a case of slowing down too much. Car in front of me is making a turn, but TACC slows down to like 25 miles an hour. I thought the guy in the back was going to rear end me. So it's either slowing down too much or not enough at all. This clip is going at 2x speed, showing perpendicular park, which I love. It does it really well. I also tried parallel park. I'm not going to bore you with that, but showing you this at 2x speed, it worked pretty flawlessly for me. So I'm pretty impressed by that. And it also impresses your friends if you show them. And actually, it taught me how to park. I would never park this way on my own. So I'm glad my Tesla knows how to do it because I certainly don't. In front of you now is a summary scorecard that I made up to try to get each of the releases a number. I think we want to try to get more quantitative than qualitative and try to get a general consensus out there about how good or bad the release is. So I broke this down into sections: auto steer highway, auto steer local, the local roads, TACC and parking. And you get a score of 1 to 3, it's red, unacceptable. 4 to 7 is marginal in yellow, and acceptable was green, and 8 to 10. So if I start with first auto steer highway, clearly the lane change confidence was the big problem, jerking us around, accelerations greater than half a G in the lane change, steering wheels moving at zero point 0.4 radians per second or higher. So the lane change is poor. I gave it a 2. The steering accuracy actually on the highway is not so bad. I hear people have concerns about exits and various things, but I didn't see a lot of that. But it is very dependent on the lane marking, so I gave it a 7. It's yellow. Smoothness around curves. I think this release compared to the prior one did make the improvement on the curves. I didn't have the data from the last release, so I gave that a 9 in green. So overall, though, auto steer on the highway comes out as a 6. That's an average across the 3 categories. It's probably one of the stronger categories for Autopilot. But unfortunately, with the lane change problem, it makes it really difficult to use. Auto steer on local roads, I won't go through the detail, but it's not smooth. It's very unstable, I think. Its accuracy isn't very high. It's not aware of a lot of things around it. So I gave it relatively low scores. Overall, a red, meaning unacceptable. I gave it a 2. Speed control, TACC. I think also I gave it a red overall score of 2. Is that you can't tell if it's going to slow down too fast or too slow. It's not very smooth because it kind of jerks around, not really being aware of things around it. The speed limit signs aren't very accurate with the database from the GPS. So overall, I think TACC is a pretty low performer. I gave that a 2. And then parking is one of my favorites. I gave it greens on parallel and perpendicular. Didn't test summon. But overall, I think parking works pretty well. So I gave that an 8, which is green. So overall, if you add all the scores together, this release comes up as a 4. So I think a lot of people have different opinions, but I think it's good if we can break things down this way and then talk about each of the individual components, and then we can help give Tesla some feedback that could be of value. That's it. Sorry for the long video, but thanks for listening. Bye.